If you are joining us live, please write any sleep questions that you have in our comment section. You may have personal questions. If you have family and friends who you think also have sleep problems, I think we all can relate to sleep issues. Share this live with them. You can tag them in the comments, or you can just share using the little arrow at the bottom of the screen. And that will share it to your Facebook page so your friends and family can see the event too. We're really excited to be here with you tonight from Twill Care. Twill Care is an app and website that includes a supportive community, helpful article, access to experts, and of course, it is free to use. And we have a variety of communities that you can join. Of course, we have our well-being community, which you may already be a part of or you're a part of here on our extended social pages. We also have pregnancy community, psoriasis, a community for those with multiple sclerosis, and for women in midlife. So I think we do a pretty good job of getting everybody a safe place, but well-being, of course, is a place for everybody. So the link for joining that community is going to be in the comments. Our team is going to be putting that in there for you frequently. You can also find us on the App Store, on both Android and Apple. So we are there for you. And we're excited to be here for Good Sleep Month. March is Good Sleep Month. I actually just learned that this year. This is my first year knowing that there is a month dedicated to helping you get the best sleep. So if you do, head over to the app after the live. We've got all sorts of content around every sleep topic that you can imagine. Some of it from Jared, reviewed by Jared, who's with us tonight. So please check that out after the live tonight. And everything you need is going to be linked in the comment section of this event. Our team is going to be in there. They're going to answer questions that you have. They're going to link stuff for us. They're going to make it really easy for Jared so he can just say, you know, here's that, and that it'll just magically be there for you. So make sure you get in the comments there. Of course, again, put your questions, your thoughts. Jared and I are really excited to have this conversation with you, but we also want you to be a part of it. That is the whole point. And with that, I want to make sure that we introduce ourselves as well. So my name is Erin. I am a social coordinator here at Twill. That means if you are on our social pages, you're talking to me. I am in doing our community moderation. Myself and my team, we're making the content that you see on social. We love what we do, and we love to be the face of Twill. And I have Jared with me today. Jared, I'll go ahead and let you introduce yourself and what you do here at Twill.
Great. Thanks, Erin. So I'm a clinical psychologist by training, and I was working in a hospital setting before moving over to digital therapeutics. So now I'm at Twill, and I'm a product developer. So it's a bit of a dream come true for me. I get to actually create some of the stuff that people see. So rather than seeing, you know, maybe 100 people a year, I can reach thousands. So it's really, really amazing. And Twill's been a great company to help kind of realize some of the great things that can be done with technology. So it's great to be here.
Yes, excited to have you. And would you mind sharing just a little bit about what experience you do have with sleep? What makes you the expert?
Yeah, so I'm like 100% sleep person. So I finished up my undergraduate in psychology, and of course had to go to graduate school. So I was looking around for programs, and the University of Pennsylvania had this incredible program in sleep science. So I met with I interviewed, and the person who would become my advisor was just one of these amazing people. So he wasn't just doing research; he was doing space analog environments with NASA. He was testifying in court, all kinds of stuff. So he was a sleep deprivation expert. So his name's David Dinges. And after I met him, I knew I had to work with him. He was amazing. So I got the scientific training at the University of Pennsylvania in sleep deprivation, but then I also got clinical training in how to sort of help people who aren't sleeping enough. So I really feel like I got kind of both sides. I was stealing sleep from people experimentally, and then I was helping give it back clinically. So I went on after that to do many more sleep things, but that was definitely the start. And then I've been active in the sleep community ever since. So it's really a great home for me. And I would encourage anybody who is considering a similar path to at least give sleep a good look. It's a great community of people.
Yeah, that's got to be fascinating for sure. So we are, again, so excited to be here and answering your questions. We're going to kick off answering questions from our Twill Care community. So if you are here from the Twill Care community, hello. We are so happy to have you. We're excited to answer your questions. And then after Jared works through some of those questions, we will again be answering questions live. So please don't forget to put your questions, your comments, your thoughts into the comments of the live so we can get to those. We do just want to let everybody know that this webinar is meant to be a helpful resource tonight, although it is not intended to be a substitute for any professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. So please always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare providers if you have questions regarding a medical condition or treatment before undertaking a new healthcare regimen, of course. That is always important. Okay, Jared, so we're just going to kick it off with the first question from the community. I am really excited about this content. I feel like a lot of these questions, as I was reading them, I was like, yes, I need this. So I'm excited to be here to learn from you. So if you would just get started and let us know, how much sleep do we really need?
Yeah, this is a good place to start. And rather than just answer the questions, I'll also try to tell you a little bit about like where the information comes from, because there's a good amount of competing information out there. And so how you remember what's true and what's false is really important, right? So our best understanding right now scientifically is that most healthy adults need between 7 and 8 hours per night, right? And you've probably heard other things, we've got questions from people in other countries who said, I've heard 4, I've heard 9, whatever. This 7 to 8 number comes from a consensus statement. So they got a bunch of the top people literally in the world to come together and talk about how much sleep they think people need. My advisor was one of them, and they compared all the science and stuff. So it wasn't a random group of people voting, right? It was like the top people. They reviewed all the information, and it looks pretty clear from different types of studies, from experimental to epidemiological, that 7 to 8 hours is true for most people, right? So back to our statement at the beginning, I don't know how much each individual person needs, but probably, right? Odds are you'll need somewhere around 7 to 8, right? One important thing to know in here, though, is that number is not supposed to freak you out, right? So a lot of our questions in here, I think, are going to come from people who are nervous about sleep, right? Now, so they're already sold, right? You already know that you need to sleep more. You're already kind of interested in sleeping. So I don't need to be like, you have to get 8 hours or something terrible is going to happen, right? So 7 to 8 hours is just a guideline that in general, that's something to shoot for, right? It doesn't mean you need that every night. And it's really important to know that you don't have to sort of make up the difference exactly. So let's say that generally you get 7 to 8 and then something happens and you only get 4 hours one night. You don't have to try to sleep 12 hours the next night, right? That's not even possible, right? So one of the things that we'll go over, I think, and an idea that I want to convey kind of over and over, is that you can trust your body to get the sleep it needs. Your body does all kinds of really cool things to stabilize the sleep system and to catch up on sleep. So we'll get into that more later. So that's a very long answer to the question, but hopefully that'll help you remember 7 to 8 hours is our best answer scientifically right now.
Well, that makes me feel good. I'm doing okay.
Good.
And I know I've totally got stuck in that loop of like, need to catch up, take a nap, or try to go to bed early, but then something gets in my way and I'm like, oh, I'm just messing it up all over the place. The other thing that, I hear a lot about that I think the community may be interested in is, what about sleep cycles? Like, is there a type of sleep? Like, should I be getting 5 hours of some kind of sleep and 2 hours of another kind of sleep? How is that working and affecting my body and those processes?
Yeah, no, so sleep stages and sleep cycles get thrown around a bit. So if you can share our I came up with a little slide for what sleep stages are, because I was actually like kind of embarrassingly late in graduate school before I actually understood what people even meant by sleep stages, right? But to understand like what it is, you kind of have to understand how we measure sleep, right? And the main thing that you'll see is brain electrical activity. So from an EEG. So it's an older technology, but a really good one in that you can see brain waves in real time. You don't really know exactly where they're coming from. It's not as good as like, MRI or some of the PET imaging that you might have heard of now, but it has some real advantages in that it's really fast. So if you look as you go through, so you start with awake. What that brain activity looks like for awake is that it's sort of all over. There's no real clear pattern to it. So that's all that's showing, is that when you're awake, there's no clear pattern to which parts of your brain are most active. As you get into sleep, it gets more organized, right? So I actually got trained in sleep scoring. I did some postdoc work after grad school, and it's really hard. It's like harder than you'd think, even with all these signals going on, right? So at some point you say they're in stage 1 sleep, but if you look at wake versus stage 1, it's not super obvious, right? So like somewhere in there, you say, all right, I think they're asleep. But if you're in stage 1 sleep, you might not even be fully unconscious, right? So you're getting some of the benefits of sleep, but it's like a very light sleep. So then you just get deeper and deeper, right? Stage 2 sleep is easy, right? That's definitely sleep. It doesn't look anything like wake. And then slow wave is super interesting, right? With those bigger waves. So what's happening kind of physiologically with the bigger waves is that a lot of your neurons are firing at the same time, right? So for a long time, we didn't really know why. We just could see it, right? So all your neurons are firing, boom, boom, boom. So it seems like they're maybe testing connections. There's been some new scientific findings, I think, in the last couple of years about how it, and maybe providing some sort of like cleaning throughout the brain. But anyway, in this, all you need to see is that REM sleep is, or sorry, slow wave sleep is very deep sleep, right? It's hard to wake people up. When we say deep, it just takes time. Like if you were in the lab and I saw you in slow wave sleep, I'd have to really kind of shake you to wake you up, right? Where in stage 1 sleep, I could just be like, hey, and you'd be like, what is it, right? So, a lot of people, probably a bunch on this call, think of themselves as light sleepers, but everybody's probably a light sleeper and a deeper sleeper throughout the night, like, depending on what stage you're in. So in the last one's REM sleep, and just brain activity doesn't really do it justice because all kinds of weird things happen during REM sleep. So it was named after what happens to the eyes. You have rapid eye movement. So you can actually just see this if you're, just looking at somebody who's asleep and their eyes are darting back and forth. They're in REM sleep. So this is where you're having your most vivid dreams. You can dream in other stages, but it's less common. But you have like your most vivid dreams, and your muscle tone is very, very relaxed, right? So that's so you can't act out your dreams. So it's as relaxed as you can be. Your muscle tone's basically gone. So people have described this as a paralyzed, what is it? A hallucinating brain and a paralyzed body. That's REM sleep, right? So yeah, sounds pleasant, right? But anyway, you go through these stages multiple times throughout the night, right? So you start with wake, you go stage 1, 2, slow wave sleep, REM, and then back up to wake. To get through all the sleep stages once takes most people about 90 minutes. So, if you get a certain number of sleep stages per night, in 3 hours, you get 2 sleep cycles, right? So math works out to about 5 hours, or sorry, 5 sleep cycles will get you 7.5 hours, right? But there's individual differences in how quickly you get through the sleep stages and things like that. But anyway, we're going to come back to that a couple times because there's a bunch of questions about sleep stages, but that's helpful to know in terms of figuring out how much sleep you need. It's not just the total duration, the quality really matters too, right? So there's probably people on the call now who are like, well, I get 7 or 8 hours, but I don't feel good. I'm sleepy during the day, whatever. So we can talk about why that might happen a little later. But this is sort of the basic idea, is that you'll go through each of the sleep stages multiple times throughout the night. Another thing that's helpful about knowing this, it's sort of looks sciencey, but like something that I used a lot with patients is that it's normal to wake up throughout the night, right? So once you complete a sleep cycle, you might wake up completely. You might wake up, you might just be in that light stage sleep and then go back to sleep. You may or may not remember these awakenings, but in the lab, we can see them. Sometimes people even wake up and talk a little bit and then go back to sleep. So it's totally normal to wake up throughout the night, right? So we'll talk about what's less normal or what gets in the way later. But if you wake up throughout the night, that alone is not a problem. Your body's sort of designed to do that.
I think that is probably really reassuring for a lot of people, that they're doing something that they are supposed to be and not something that they shouldn't be. So what happens if I don't get enough sleep? So be it that it's, 7 hours or my quality's not good, what's going to happen to me? I know how I feel, but what actually can that process be if, you consistently aren't getting enough or good sleep?
Yeah, right. So I'll go over some of the key things that we know about, right? And this is also part of how we know how much sleep people need, right? So, if you take away sleep from people, how much do you have to take away before you start seeing something bad happen, right? And what are those bad things? So one of the easiest things to measure, and that psychologists love, is just your attention and your reaction time. So you can do it, with a very cheap instrument. You just have a little reaction time test, and you sleep deprive people, and then you see what their reaction times are like. So people have done tons and tons of studies with reaction time tests. You can't even imagine how many studies they've done. And what they've found is that a couple interesting things happen with sleep deprivation. One is that overall just things slow down, right? You're not as quick as you are when you're well rested, right? So if normally your reaction time can be like 200 to 300 milliseconds, it'll start to drag out a little bit. So that's one thing. A more interesting thing is that you start to have lapses, right? So especially if you're really sleep deprived, sometimes your eyes just glaze over, and the little box is telling you push a button and you're just gone, right? Lights are on, but nobody's home. And when you have people hooked up to EEG, you can see they're getting little micro sleeps. So if you're really sleep deprived, if you're a medical intern, or if you're just, have kids that won't let you sleep, whatever, right? Sometimes you'll actually have lapses, right? The other thing that's good to know is that, or useful to know, is that your performance gets worse the longer you do something, right? So we gave these people these brutal 10-minute reaction time tasks, which doesn't seem that bad, but it's really boring, right? So for a couple minutes, they're okay, right? They're trying hard, they're like doing their thing, and then their performance just starts to fall apart, right? So the reason that's important to know is that if you're in the type of job where mistakes matter, right? Say you're a pilot, right? A doctor, a nurse, anything like that. You need to know that the longer you go, the more likely you are to make a mistake. So there's been lots of studies about how to reduce those mistakes. So that's one, is that you get these really clear sort of cognitive problems. The part that I researched more was the emotional part. So you mentioned how you're feeling. So there's lots of different aspects to emotion. And for a while, we weren't allowed to study emotion. Like we sciencey people weren't allowed to study it because it seemed fluffy or something, right? Like you're talking about feelings. But one of the nice things that happened with neuroscience is that went away, and now you have very serious people who've been studying emotion for a long time. And there's all these different components, right? So there's brain components, there's behavioral components, there's your subjective feelings, there's whether or not you can tell what somebody else is feeling. All those are affected by sleep deprivation, and none of them in a good direction, right? So one of my favorite experiments that I did in graduate school is we sleep deprived people for 36 hours. So they're in a laboratory. It was kind of funny. And we didn't let them sleep all night. And then we tested them the next day. So they're really, really tired, right? And then we showed them funny clips, right? So when you're sleep deprived and you see a funny clip, you don't really laugh, right? Your face is just, and you're like, right? That was pretty funny, right? The interesting thing though is people still said they were funny. So our best guess is that they still felt like they were funny. They just didn't express it at all, right? So that's why if you really are sleepy, people say, "Are you okay? You know, are you sad? Like what's wrong?" Because when you're not showing expressions, people think you're sad or depressed or something, right? So it could just be a temporary thing that you're not sleeping well. The other thing that happens though is you're bad at interpreting other people's emotions, right? So they've done really elegant studies on this. So I'm sleepy, I see you smiling and nodding, and I think, "Are you mad at me?" Right? Like, what does that mean? Right? So you get worse at like understanding what people are trying to say and how they're communicating everything. Now, none of these are catastrophic. Like we have to get people in the lab and we have to like really sleep deprive them hard. So in the real world, these probably aren't things that are going to devastate you, but like we have so many emotional interactions with people throughout the day. If all of them are a little off, it starts to sort of take a toll, right? And then the last sort of group of things that have been investigated is what does it do to you kind of physiologically? And there have been some interesting studies showing that your immune system is not as good if you don't sleep. Your body does a lot of helpful things while you're sleeping. So there's some increased inflammation. It looks like there's some sort of negative impact on your immune system functioning. Now, if you do this really long term, like the people that they studied were shift workers, so that's really consistent, very long term sleep problems. Then you get into more sort of chronic medical conditions and stuff, right? So in the EU, they actually consider that hazard pay. I don't know if we do that here, probably not, but there are documented medical consequences of long term shift work. Now, going back and speaking to the people on the call who are more kind of nervous, am I getting enough sleep? I'm going to get sick if I don't get enough sleep. Probably not. Like if you have enough sleep opportunity, you can trust your body to get the sleep that it needs, right? It's more if you have one of these jobs where you're not allowed to sleep, or if you have a really clearly documented medical condition that interferes with sleep, then that's more in that camp. So some of the times these popular press articles, I think, freak people out and do more harm than good. But those are three areas. So like cognitive, emotional, and kind of physical or biomedical are three areas that we've really looked into a lot. And those are some of the highlights of what we've learned.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Like I was thinking when you were saying that people don't always show like an outward display of like laughter or whatever. We always say like, we're on low battery, but that kind of really is what it's like. It's like, it's just not, everything's just not firing on all cylinders. So with that, how do we get better sleep? What can we do? Is there something that we can do to get better sleep? What can we work on? What can we do different?
Yeah, great. So it's helpful to kind of understand normal sleep first, and then kind of think about what you're doing kind of within that model. A lot of what I encourage people to do, barring significant medical conditions and things like that, those is more about like removing things that are getting in the way, right? Versus adding in more things, right? There's these multi-billion-dollar industries around adding more stuff to help you sleep, whether it's like a mattress or, whatever, right? And like I said, like we said at the beginning, if that's something that you and your healthcare professional have decided is helpful for you, that's great. But a lot of it is just sort of snake oil, right? So if we have that two-process model, I think that's a good place to kind of start for understanding what you can do for better sleep. And so I can sell you on this idea that what I'm going to try to sell people on is a little bit unusual, but it makes more sense with the two process model.
Oh yes.
Yeah. So this is a very famous figure in sleep circles, right? And so this first came out in 1982 and was updated in 2016. This takes a little bit of explaining, so I apologize for that. But it's important to know that you have two different sleep processes that interact to determine whether you can sleep or not, right? So it's not just one. We tend to either think about one or the other, but you really have to think about both. So the first one I'm going to start with is homeostatic sleep pressure. So that's just your sleep drive. So the longer you're up, the longer, the more desire you have to fall asleep, right? So you talked about running out of a battery. Like in sleep science, we think about it as more like weight pushing down on you almost, right? Like your brain's trying to go to sleep, and sleep's a very active process, right? So the longer you're up, the more your brain is kind of yelling at you, you need to sleep, right? So as the day goes on, you need to sleep. So that's what that red part is. Now, what you're looking at is one person's sleep across 48 hours. So you have the day and the night. So while they're awake throughout the day, the sleep pressure is just building nice and steady. Fall asleep, it kind of burns off all throughout the night until you wake up again, and then it builds again, right? Overlaid on top of that, though, is your circadian rhythm, right? So you've probably heard of biological clocks or circadian rhythms, but these two interact at all times to let you know how you feel. So if you just had sleep pressure, you'd wake up feeling as good as you're going to feel all day, and then you just get sleepier and sleepier throughout the day until you finally sort of passed out at night. But what your circadian rhythm does is it balances that out. So as your sleep pressure is going up, so is your circadian arousal, right? So it's like having, this is a little bit of a funny way to think of it, but like one's like having natural alcohol in your body, and the other's like having natural caffeine to balance it out, right? It's not exactly like that, but that's the idea, right? One's trying to put you to sleep, the other's trying to keep you up, and they kind of balance each other out. So when they balance each other out, you have healthy, normal sleep, right? So a lot of the sleep problems that we see are related to these two processes not being lined up, right? So what you're seeing here is when it's all working, right? When it looks nice and you're waking up at the right time for your body, and you're going to sleep at the right time for your body, everything's nice, right? The reason that I brought this up and spent a little bit of time on it is that where I think most people get the sort of biggest bang for their buck with sleep is if they actually focus on the day, right? Even though sleep happens at night, people end up getting really focused on the night. What can I do? Can I get some like blue light glasses or a really good bed, or like what kind of tea should I drink at night? If you've messed up, during the day, you don't have a whole lot of options, right? So if your sleep pressure is not high enough to let you sleep, or your circadian rhythms at the wrong point where it's going to try to keep you up, it's going to be really hard to sleep, right? So the best thing that you can do, and sorry, this is in the evening, so wait till tomorrow, but pick a good time to wake up, and try to wake up at about that time every day for like a week, right? So one of the things that happens is people try it for like a day or two, and they'll be like, I'm not doing that anymore, right? But it takes, about a week for most people to see good benefits from waking up at the same time each day. That's your chance, right? Because you don't have much control over falling asleep. You have a lot more control over waking up. So if you pick a good time that works for you, you wake up at that time tomorrow and the next day and the next day, you'll start getting sleepy closer to the right times, right? So rather than doing all this stuff to try to make yourself sleep when you don't want to, right? Just help yourself get up at the same time each day, get your two processes aligned, and then you've got a much better chance of falling asleep at night.
Yes, that's helpful. I have to wake up at the same time every day to take my kids to school. So like I'm winning. Even if
that's actually really helpful. I've worked with a lot of people who are either retired or unemployed. It's really hard to get up when you don't need to, right? So it can kind of save us to have a reason that you sort of have to get up, right? I've worked with people for embarrassingly long amounts of time, and then they get a job, and then they just get up at the time we've been planning. So
right.
sometimes you need a reason.
You need like a reason to get up. Yes, I hear that. So now that you've kind of laid a really good foundation for us about like how sleep works, what we can do to sleep better, our community has submitted some kind of like specific scenarios that they would like maybe just some insight on, kind of just generally, what if this is happening to me? So the first scenario is around falling asleep. We had lots of community members ask, like, my brain won't turn off, even though I'm exercising, turning my phone off, keeping a regular sleep schedule, that anxiety or brain running or whatever is just constantly there.
Yeah, I bet half the people on the call think that they might have sent this in by accident, right? This applies to so many people that they'll be like, how did they know that, right? And one of the reasons that I like to do these things as a community is that, sleep problems are very isolating. A lot of these types of problems are, but at night you feel like you're the only person who's awake in the world, right? Even if you have a bed partner, for some reason, two bad sleepers never marry. We should do a study on this, right? It's always a good sleeper and a bad sleeper get married for some reason. So this is a really nice one to start with. So you're kind of doing everything right. And what I've been through so far is stuff that you probably could have found by Googling it, maybe not the underlying sort of reasons behind it, but like the basic idea of sleep stages and wake up at the same time and that kind of stuff, right? So now we're getting into slightly more advanced stuff, which is good, right? So what I think is really helpful here is to review this sort of cognitive model of where insomnia comes from. So this will resonate with a bunch of you. If it doesn't resonate, that's okay. You probably just have a different set of things that you're dealing with. But if we could show that vicious cycle of insomnia slide, this will help kind of contextualize a few different questions, right? So let's say that you're doing everything right and your body sort of should sleep. Why in the world wouldn't you sleep, right? So one of the things that can overwhelm even the two process model is if you're experiencing a strong emotion, right? So your body wants to stay alive more than it wants to sleep, right? And our bodies aren't all that smart and when it's trying to kind of detect a threat, right? So we kind of process all threats as about the same, right? So whether it's, a tiger is about to try to eat me, or I might fail a test, your body does that fight or flight response, gives you a bunch of adrenaline, gets you ready to go. And a lot of times that's not what you need, right? So it's not what you need when you're taking a test, and it's not what you need when you're trying to sleep, right? So this model was really developed by Alison Harvey and her colleagues. She's one of my favorite clinical scientists in the sleep field. This is super, super useful. So this originally came out in 2002. There have been tons of follow-ups, and I use this all the time, especially with more complicated sleep problems. But just walking through it briefly, you start with a situation, right? So, I wake up in the middle of the night, right? Sorry, remind me, what was the question? I can go through this with the question.
We've had lots of questions about falling asleep and staying asleep.
Let's start with falling asleep, right? So situation is I'm in bed, and that situation alone is fine. But then I have a thought in my head, like, what if I don't fall asleep? Or I really hope I sleep tonight. Like, I really need to sleep or tomorrow's going to be terrible, right? So whatever goes through your mind, that can trigger emotions, right? So thoughts don't just sit there doing nothing when you think, I really need to sleep, or something terrible is going to happen. You'll get a rush of often fear or anxiety, right? Fear and anxiety are signal to your brain that you're in danger, right? And if you're in danger, you can't sleep, right? So if you're in danger, you don't, we're very vulnerable when we're sleeping, right? We're like, passed out, and like anybody could come up, an animal could just get us there. We have no defenses when we're asleep. So if your nervous system detects danger, you're going to wake up, right? So you're thinking, oh man, I really need to sleep, right? Now your body's more awake. So it said, what? There's danger around. What are we doing? So you get that emotion, that feeling. It's going to drive you to do something, right? And 9 times out of 10, what it drives you to do is something that makes sleep even worse. So that's why it's a vicious cycle, right? So let's say that you're feeling like, oh man, I really have to do this. It might drive you to like do something, right? You're like, oh my God, I can't sleep. I need to do something. Maybe I'll take some random medicine, right? Or maybe I'll count sheep, right? Or maybe I'll try extra hard to sleep. Maybe I'll just check my phone for a little bit, right? Phones, I swear, like, 2 things that have made sleep the worst are the pandemic and phones, right? And phones came first, so they're a problem. But your phones are so seductive, right? You're like, well, I'll just listen to a meditation. So you bring out your phone, your little kind of addiction device, right? And you're like, I'm gonna listen to a meditation, right? I'm gonna fire up, the Twill app, but then there's something else on there, maybe your email. You're like, I'll just check email real quick, right? Or Facebook or whatever, right? You check something and you go down a rabbit hole, and then you're sort of wide awake, right? So that problem behavior can be what leads to sleep disturbance, or it can be the emotion itself, right? The other thing is problem behaviors can feed back into more bad thoughts, right? So maybe you get up and you check, and I can't sleep. And so you just search real quick, like, what does it mean if I can't sleep? And maybe some medical disorder comes up, or you see a study talking about how important it is to sleep. If you don't sleep, you're going to die younger or something. You think, I really need to sleep. Right now, you've got a new thought that just keeps the cycle going, right? So that's sort of one pathway through. The sneakier one is the one below it, the problematic thought processes. So what happens there is you're thinking, I really hope I sleep tonight, and then you just start self-monitoring, like, am I sleepy enough to sleep? How do my eyes feel? My eyes feel pretty tired. I hope I sleep. I don't know. I don't know if I'm sleepy enough, right? So monitoring then feeds back to more thoughts like, it's not going to happen tonight. Or it could be a thought like, I'm so tired, why can't I sleep, right? So now the 2 big emotions for insomnia are anxiety, which everybody knows, but also anger. So I know there's a lot of people on the call that are very familiar with anger and frustration, right? Where you just get mad and you're like, I forget this. I'm just going to go work, right? I'm just going to get up. I can't sleep anyway. This is stupid, right? And you're sort of like angry at something for not being able to sleep, right? Anger wakes you up. It sometimes feels a little better than anxiety, right? But both of those will disrupt sleep. So you can be doing everything right? You can be, avoiding light at night. You can be waking up at the right time. You can be going to bed at the right time. But if you've got that type of vicious cycle thing going, it can be really difficult. So just knowing about that is helpful for a lot of people. And then, if you can work with a behavioral sleep medicine specialist, they can help you target different areas in there. So that's not just a diagram of sort of the water you're drowning in, right? There's different places to intervene. So once you know that those processes aren't helpful, you can at least notice them and sort of gently move them towards something else, right? Once you know that like some of the behaviors aren't that helpful, you can substitute other behaviors that are more helpful. And it takes time, but not a ton of time, right? So that's one of the reasons I really like treating sleep problems, is that they actually tend to get better very, very quickly compared to some other things that we can try to treat in clinical psychology. So anyway, well, that's at least a brief overview of that one, but I think we'll come back to that in some of the later questions too.
I think probably. So probably the most popular question, Gab, who's our team member that's in the comments tonight, says that everybody has questions about staying asleep. So our scenario is waking in the middle of the night, fall asleep easy, 10, 15 minutes, sleep really well for about 5 hours, wake up and it's like ready to go. Maybe a little tired, maybe that, first sleep stage, but often just feels like not going back to sleep. And again, doing all the right things, like not hanging out in the bedroom, not using screens before bed. Like how are we to be staying asleep?
No, that's right. So that's a great question, and feeds right off the cognitive model that I displayed. So that's one of the reasons I like that approach so much, right? Is that it explains some things that are otherwise pretty tricky. So first of all, if somebody says they sleep any number of hours, my follow-up question would be like, how do you know that's how many hours you sleep? Because you're doing something wrong and you're looking at the clock, right? You shouldn't be doing that, right? Or I think you would sleep better if you didn't do that. We can frame it a little more positively, right? But what happens if you picture that model? Actually, if we can bring that up again, we can actually walk this right through that same model, right? So the situation is fell asleep fine, but then you wake up, which at the beginning I said was normal, right? Everybody wakes up throughout the night, but you wake up and you have a thought, right? And the thought something like, it better not be 4 a.m, right? Whatever time it is fine, but not whatever the time is for you, right? It better not.
I always do that.
Right. Yeah. So people have their different magic times, right? Oh my God. Like, how long did I sleep? I don't know how long I slept. I better not be awake again. Like, and so you check the clock, right? That's the actual behavior, is checking the clock. People do this, right? Because I mean, I do it too, right? You want to know, but like, you don't need to, right? It's not morning, right? So if it's not morning, you're going to lay there and see if you fall asleep, right? If it is morning, you're going to get up. So like, people are like, oh no, it's like 1:15 or it's 2:37 or it's 5:05, right? It really doesn't matter. So what I encourage people to do is find some way to not check the clock, at least not do it automatically. So you can turn the clock around, you can cover it with a little cloth. A lot of people use their phones. You can get your phone out of arm's reach. Ideally, you'd get it out of the bedroom, but we don't have enough time to do that. That's a massive behavioral intervention to get people to not sleep with their phone. So just put it out of arm's reach so you don't automatically check it, right? And then set an alarm so it's real clear, like yes or no, right? It's really clear, has it gone off or not? If it hasn't gone off, it's still time to be asleep, right? So then you just lay there, and if you're trying to sleep, you're doing something wrong, right? Like when sleep works, it's a totally passive process. I encourage people to think about it like blood clotting, right? You don't do anything to make your blood clot, and you don't do anything to fall asleep. Anything you do keeps you up, right? So if you're trying really hard to sleep, you're keeping yourself up, right? So you lay there and you see if you sleep, right? If you can't sleep, there's different things that you can do, right? So one of the things that seems to be helpful for a lot of people is to get out of bed for 20 to 30 minutes, just relax, don't do anything useful, and then go back to bed again and see if you sleep. But the main thing is to kind of figure out what it is, like what's your own kind of vicious cycle all about, right? Like what are the thoughts going through your head and what are they driving you to do, right? If you can replace that thought like, oh no, I'm awake, with of course I'm awake. Everybody wakes up throughout the night. It's totally normal, right? Roll over, go back to sleep. The other thing that's really helpful is to know that you can cope with it, right? I've worked with a lot of people, even if their sleep never gets 100% better, they just get that confidence and almost swagger that like, yeah, they're fine, right? Like they've done this for long enough, like they're going to be okay, right? They've probably been through worse. So it's good to kind of remind yourself that, you can handle it, right? Sometimes in the morning, everything seems like extra bad, or like you feel more vulnerable when you're like kind of sleepy and everything, but during the day, you're okay. And like, you get going, you have coffee, you have like your your different things that you can do to help wake yourself up. So once you actually make it through to the daytime, people are usually fine. So that's probably a good chunk of the people on this call. That's probably what's going on, is that you're kind of waking up and you're thinking about stuff that gets those emotions going and then triggers that type of vicious cycle. So that's at least a couple of clues on how to unwind it. That's not enough probably for you to do it, but maybe it's enough to convince you to go see a sleep specialist and see if you can get the work done and get your sleep kind of fixed up.
Yeah, I think those are great tips. And if you guys that are watching have tips on what's worked for you, pop them in the comments, because it is so nice to learn from one another. Like, even if it's not the magic fix, it's like, oh, it's something that you can try, something you may not have thought of. So please put what's worked for you in the comments as well, so that the community watching can, kind of get those ideas. And on that, Jared, this kind of, I think, feeds into that last question of the obsessing over the hours and the cycles and the time, is using a sleep tracker, be it your phone, your watch, your ring, a pedometer. Do they help? Do they not help? What are your thoughts on those kinds of things?
Yeah, so you have to do kind of a fearless moral inventory, see if it's helping you or not, right? Because some people love it, right? Some people love to track things, and it's great for them. It's fun. That's what it's supposed to be. Like, I don't think any of these are medical devices yet. They're all just kind of wellness things. They'll let you know how much you moved in the night. A lot of them now are estimating sleep stages. There's no way that they can actually do them, but they do them sort of well enough that they can publish papers that the correlation is pretty high, right? That's not nearly enough for like a medical setting, right? We would never get away with that. If somebody came in and they wanted to know their sleep stages and we gave them, a commercial sleep tracker, like that wouldn't cut it, right? So don't use that on yourself either, right? If you're really worried about something, if you're like, oh no, I'm not getting enough REM sleep, like talk to a doctor, right? The medical doctors are board certified in sleep medicine, or can be, right? And then behavioral sleep medicine specialists, if their specialty is sleep, then they can help you kind of sort it out, right? But there are some sort of decent ways to use it, right? If you're really just not sure, you have a chaotic pattern, you can wear a watch for a while and check it out and see what your pattern is and be like, oh, that's interesting, right? It's really good for knowing what time you woke up, because that's a really big signal. And the main thing in all those watches is an accelerometer, right? So it measures, change in velocity, but it measures movement, right?
Right.
So when you're asleep, you don't move much, right? Even when you're watching TV, you move more than you think, right? Even if you're laying on the couch and, people think you're not doing anything, you'll scratch your nose, you'll roll around, like the watches can detect that, right? And in the morning, after you've been sleeping and then you get up and you walk around, it can very clearly see what time you got out of bed. So if you're working with somebody and you have a goal to get out of bed at, whatever time each day, you can check back and see how you're doing, right? But hopefully the watch would help you feel good about your progress, right? We don't want it to bum you out. So if your watch is like making you feel bad, it's probably time to think about taking a little break, right? If you watch it and you think, oh no, I didn't get enough slow wave sleep last night, right? My watch told me I didn't get deep sleep. Today's going to be awful, right? You don't want that. That's not helpful, right? So that's sort of my overall take on it, right? If you're kind of nervous about your sleep and you're watching it and you're thinking that like how you slept that night is going to perfectly determine how you do that day, that's not a great way to use a sleep tracker, right? So
Right.
take a little break from it, right? Use it for something else. It's cool for exercise, right? Counting your steps and things, that's good. But if it's not helping your sleep, then break up with it for a little while, and you can always go back if you miss it.
Yes, I had to break up with mine. I had to put it like on the bathroom counter at night because I was obsessing. So I'm just the perfect example.
Yeah.
All right. Well, those are just like, we got so many awesome, scenarios and questions from the community. We are ready to jump to the people that are here with us tonight and asking questions. So we're going to jump into those questions and get a few answered. I just want to remind you that we definitely want to keep this conversation going. So whatever we can't answer tonight, our experts in the app, our community will be having these conversations. So be sure to click that link, have conversations here in the comments of this live as well. But our first question is, Jared, what are your thoughts on catching up on sleep? So you talked a little bit about that, but like after not getting a good night of sleep, should you nap? Should you wait till the weekend and sleep in? Is there any kind of science that says do this or do that?
Yeah, this is so fun. So we've actually spent way more tax money than you would ever guess on figuring these things out. So we really know a lot of stuff, right? So one thing, you definitely can catch up on sleep, but there's a lot of science behind it, right? So when I was in school, I swear somebody told me you can't catch up on sleep, right? I feel like that's a thing that goes around, right? Like you can't store sleep or something, right? I have no idea where that came from, but logically that can't possibly be true, or we would all be the most tired we've ever been, right? So if you're tired, there's no way to recover. Like you can never feel good again, right? So a study that was done, so this is my advisor again, he did a really very expensive, very highly controlled experiment on sleep deprivation and recovery sleep, right? And there's lots of interesting things that he found in there, but some of the highlights are that you do sleep a little bit longer, right? So if, let's say that you have an overnight shift, right? You're, you know, whatever, say you're an emergency worker or something, you work all through the night, and then you stay up all the way till the next day. If you fall asleep, you'll sleep a lot more than your normal 7 to 8. You might get as much as 9 hours of sleep. Your sleep architecture will also change, which is good to know, right? So your body will prioritize the sleep it needs. It'll get you more slow wave sleep. It'll sacrifice the light sleep. And so you'll do better that next day. You won't sleep 12 hours, right? So that was one of the interesting findings, is that you can't like recover all the sleep in one night.
Right.
It takes a few nights to catch up, right? And the best thing that you can do is just get back on track, right? So you have a long overnight flight, you have a sick kid, and you go to the emergency department where you wait for 36 hours to to see an intern, right? You know, whatever it is, you will catch up again. But the best thing you can do is just protect a reasonable amount of sleep and keep getting up at the same time in the morning, right? So oversleeping in the morning by more than about an hour can throw off that whole 2-process model that we went over at the beginning. So, you know, give yourself a little bit of extra time in bed, but then also give yourself more than one night to catch up. So that's recovery sleep at night. Naps are really fun too, and I think we have an article on naps, and I know we have some good stuff on naps generally. But people have probably heard of power naps. That kind of made it into the general, I don't know, thinking or something. Power naps are pretty good, right? So a power nap is something that's maybe less than 30 minutes, so around a 20 to 30 minute nap, right? What's nice about that is if you think about the sleep stages again, you don't get all the way into deep sleep, right? You just get into stage maybe 2, right? So stage 1 and then a little bit into 2, and then you wake up. What's nice about that is that it's not going to throw off your sleep at night, right? So if you picture the 2-process model again, if you take a long nap in the middle of the day, you burn off sleep pressure before it's nighttime, right? So you need to be awake for about 14, 15 hours in order to fall asleep, right?
Right.
I do that math right. Maybe 16 hours, right? Yeah. 8 hours of sleep, 16 hours a day is 24. 16, 17 hours in order to fall asleep, right? So if you've only been awake for 14 hours, it might be nighttime and you like can't sleep and it's upsetting. So that's not as good, right? So if unless you're massively sleep deprived, you don't want like a super long nap, right? So a little short nap can make you feel a little bit refreshed. It can be good. There's been studies that it can help you drive a little bit better, things like that. So a short nap's good. Another thing that's fun for people to know about is right when you wake up, you might feel super groggy, whether it's a long nap or nighttime sleep. When you wake up, you feel like you got hit by a truck sometimes. And they have a name for that. They named it sleep inertia, because it's like your brain still kind of wants to be asleep, right? So it takes some energy to get it going. So the reason that's good to know about is that you hopefully will be less nervous if you wake up and you feel like garbage, right? It burns off in about 20 to 30 minutes. So that's not how you're going to feel all day, but it's one of the reasons we don't recommend really long naps generally, right? There's some special cases where long naps are better, but for most people, it's best to not nap at all or do a little short nap so that you don't have to deal with sleep inertia and that you don't, kind of throw off your whole sleep schedule. The biggest caveat to that is if you're a shift worker, and we don't have time to go into like how to manage shift work, but there's a whole different thing about that. So if you're a shift worker, just like maybe ask a question or something in one of our communities, and we'll have some resources on that. But that gets a little complicated. So one thing at a time.
There's always something.
So short naps. Oh, the other thing about naps is that it is good if you do it in the middle of the day, right? So a short nap right after you wake up doesn't make sense. A short nap right before bed doesn't make sense. So right around lunchtime seems to be when your body wants to nap and when it'll get the best quality sleep for the minutes.
Right. So like use your lunch, your wellness hour, your lunchtime to take your nap.
Right.
Another great question that came from the viewers tonight is, can you speak to the impact of exercise and alcohol on sleep? Now, not necessarily like together, not like,
right. I know some of you, I've seen your kickball.
But how those can affect sleep.
So exercise, we have somebody at Twill who I can never not think of when we talk about exercise. Exercise is one of the best things you can do just in your life in general, right? It's good for mental well-being. It's good for physical health. There's always like a new study about how great exercise is. For sleep, the best thing you can do related to exercise is just regular exercise. It doesn't have to be intense. It doesn't have to be anything that you would get great like cardiovascular improvements from. It doesn't have to be about weight loss. It's just like any kind of regular exercise. I'd have to review the studies, but I think it can be as little as like 30 minutes, right? It could literally be walking, right? It doesn't have to be, weightlifting or swimming or something, more intense. So regular exercise any time of day seems to be good, right? The only time you can get into trouble with exercise is if you use it because you get anxious, right? If you think, oh my God, I'm not going to sleep tonight. I know what I'll do. I'm going to tire myself out, right? So exercise helps wake you up, right? It helps relieve stress and it wakes you up. So astronauts use it as a countermeasure for fatigue or as an energy booster. Maybe some of you have seen, even when they're on like out in a space station or something, they have exercise bikes. Some of that is to offset, muscle and bone loss, but some of it is because exercise is really, really good for alertness. And astronauts don't sleep well, which would be kind of an interesting subtopic, but another time maybe, right? But anyway, so exercise, so that's the one time that people get into trouble, is if they're trying to exercise so hard that they're exhausted and they fall asleep, right? People may have had the experience where they slept really well after like going for a long outdoor hike, or they were on vacation and they're trying to figure out why they slept so well. It's not that, right? So if you exercise super hard and then get right into bed, you're not going to be able to sleep, because it's like, it's like caffeine, but a lot better for you, but it's still like caffeine in that your physiological arousal will be up, you'll be awake, it's hard to sleep. So that's the only time that I would discourage exercise, is if it's kind of got this frantic energy of like, oh, I'm going to tire myself out and then I'll sleep. But any kind of regular exercise is fantastic. So definitely encourage that. Alcohol is the other end of the spectrum, right? So, alcohol does a few weird things, right? One of the things it does is disrupt sleep stages, right? So alcohol will change your sleep architecture. So even if you were to fall asleep, you drink a whole lot and it's easy to sort of pass out, right? Your brain's not going through the sleep stages in the right order. You're dehydrated. You might have to, go to the bathroom, that kind of stuff. So excessive alcohol is not at all good. I did see one European study though, and I feel like I wouldn't be being intellectually honest if I didn't say, didn't mention it. A small amount of alcohol, like a glass of wine or less, doesn't seem to do anything bad to sleep, and may actually, for some people, seem to help. I would never encourage anybody to use alcohol as a sleeping pill, because like if you need a sleeping pill, just like go to your doctor and get a good one that's been sort of evaluated and we know it's safe and whatever. And alcohol interacts with other medications and things. So the reason that I bring it up, and the way I think you can use that information helpfully, is to not worry too much, right? Don't, like, if you're not sleeping well, don't think that you can never go out with friends, or you can never like, have a cocktail or something. Like it, talk to your doctor. But for a lot of people, like, you'll be okay if you keep it within reason. It's the more excessive alcohol use that seems to really destroy sleep, and lots of other things.
Yeah, and I think we definitely have some content on Twill Care about like sleep and medicine, sleep and naps, sleep and exercise. So hop over to the app for sure, to look, or the website to look at that content. So unfortunately, and the hour has flown by, because that's just how time goes, right? Except maybe when you're trying to fall asleep. But so we're going to wrap it up with one last question. If you could just share maybe 2 or 3 habits that we can do during the day that will improve our quality of sleep, and then we'll kind of wrap up the call, or the.
Yeah, fantastic. So the main thing about during the day is to don't give in to the sort of voices telling you to avoid things, right? So avoidance is never a good way forward, right? Like if we say exercise is almost always good, avoidance is almost always bad, right? So if you don't sleep well, then you start thinking, oh, you know what, I'm gonna cancel all my meetings, and maybe I'll call in sick, and maybe I'll just rest up, right? Even if it comes from a good place, thinking you're going to take care of yourself or work on your mental health, that seems to not be a very good way to do it, right? And so this goes back to the same sort of Allison Harvey research that I mentioned earlier. Avoiding those kinds of things sets you up for worse sleep, right? So say you cancel all your meetings for the day, they're going to be waiting for you the next day, right? Like say you skip things, you skip something important to you, something that matters. Right now your day was worse. Right now your day was boring. It was, and now you start thinking, man, this insomnia is really ruining my life. I can't do anything. I can't drive my kids around, this is awful. And then it kind of spirals and gets worse and worse, right? So during the day, just keep doing things that you find enjoyable and meaningful, right? So if you can take the time to figure out what that is, right? And sometimes we have to like take a minute to breathe, right? Like Aaron, you mentioned you have kids. I have a kid. It's easy that you're just on autopilot or you're just kind of surviving for a while. Every now and then be like, wait, what did I want out of life? Like, what do I care about? And then make sure you're not sacrificing those things, right? So often if you're stressed or you're not sleeping well, you start getting rid of all the things that give you joy and meaning, right? You keep the things you have to do, right? Like you still probably go to work, even if you don't really fully show up there, right? And then when you go home, you cancel things with friends, you don't talk to your kids as much, all that kind of stuff, right? So the more you can do that kind of thing, it sets you up for better sleep at night through a variety of reasons that are super interesting, but we don't have time to get into. So that's a good one. A couple others that are worth thinking of, we call these countermeasures for fatigue or energy boosters. Anything involving exercise is great. So you wake up and you're like, oh, I really didn't sleep well. Rather than thinking I need to cancel everything, think I'm really going to have to like go for a run today, or I'm really going to have to like go for a walk outside or whatever, right? Like do something, right?
Right.
A related one is bright light. So assuming it's not the dead of winter and you're in New England like me, you can probably find sunlight during the day. So if you're fatigued and trying to like make it through the day, if you can get into some sunlight or even artificial bright light is sort of sometimes the best you can do. That can be really helpful for offsetting fatigue. So you want to think about managing fatigue and generating energy during the day. Try not to think about how you can avoid things and conserve your energy.
Yeah, that's just really awesome. It's really helpful. It just like, I try to get outside every morning, but now I'm going to like remember, like Jared says, go outside. Uh, so we have had so many great questions, so much great content. Jared, you are a wealth of knowledge. Is there anything as we wrap up that you want to leave the community that's here with us tonight? Like if there's one or two things about sleep or about what we talked to tonight that you'd like them to take away from our conversation?
Yeah, the main thing is just if you're having trouble with sleep, there's every reason to be hopeful. There's lots of sleep people like me out there who are dying to help. We're just trying to scale up everything so that we can see everyone. But if you've been dealing with a sleep problem for a long time, even if the things I was talking about today don't seem like quite right for you, see if you can get an individualized person to really talk to your problems about almost anything we can improve. Right. So whether it's sleep apnea, I worked with somebody who couldn't sleep well because they had really significant issues related to brain and spinal damage. Right. And we still got them sleeping about twice as much as when they came in. Just, you have every reason to be hopeful. Right. We know tons of stuff about sleep. We can definitely stand on the shoulders of giants here and learn everything that we can and almost always help people. So don't give up. Try to find the right person. Right. And see if you can improve your sleep.
That is really, really great information and a great kind of reassurance as we wrap up. Again, I just want to remind everybody that we have conversations like this every single day in our Twill Care communities. There are experts like Jared that are able to answer your questions. In our app, we even have a feature where you can like specifically ask experts a question if you want expert answers. The community is incredible and supportive, and it's a safe place. If you're on your desktop tonight, you can use your phone to scan the QR code on the screen. Of course, we're on Instagram, here on Facebook, and again, Twill Care in the App Store on both platforms. So we want to again remind you that we've got our well-being community where everybody is welcome, and we talk about sleep and exercise and all sorts of kinds of well-being, or just again a safe place. If you're looking for a real specific community, we do also serve psoriasis, pregnancy, multiple sclerosis, and women in midlife. So the app is free for everyone. It's free for you to download, for you to use, and of course we love you to be in our community here on social, and hope you will continue to follow us here as well. Again, I just want to give another thank you to Jared for taking time out of his evening to be here with us to answer these questions for us. This live will be available to watch here on our Facebook page, like in just a few minutes. If you didn't catch the beginning, you want to come back, you want to share it, please do so. But we encourage you to, do the things that make you happy. Like Jared said, be hopeful about sleep, and hopefully we will see you over in the app. Thanks again.
Thanks so much.